slides up here. Okay. And all right. So, as Natalie said, my name is Stephen Spong, and I am the director of the Law Library here at Western, and I am also the copyright officer for the university as well. So I have a fairly broad portfolio, and certainly the law touches on a great deal of it. So, but today I'm here to talk to you specifically about copyright, and I am going to be talking about some of the basics of Canadian copyright law and some of the things that as educators it's helpful to know about when preparing materials and some of the rights and obligations that you might have under Canadian copyright law. So I've got a loose agenda here, and so I'm going to start with the basics of copyright, including what it is and why it matters. And then I'm going to talk specifically about provisions in the Copyright Act that touch on educators and the work that educators do. And then I'm going to go over some of the types of material that are most commonly used for instruction and teaching, and the things that you need to think about when you're using these materials, and the sort of workarounds that you may or may not have when using the material. So that sort of leads into the next topic, which is the reproduction of material, and that includes both photocopying and digital sharing as well. So then I'm going to talk a little bit about open access and OERs. Now, open access and OERs are an entire topic into and of themselves. So I am just going to be touching on it quite briefly because it can be, we could even easily spend an hour talking about that alone. And then I'm going to go over a few key tips that you should consider when working with copyrighted material, and things to consider. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about what has changed under COVID in terms of how we use copyrighted materials and how we don't, and some of the ways in which the approach to it have changed in the last year. And then finally, there will be time for questions. So I'm hoping that you can save your questions for the end. And if we run over time, I'm always happy to answer questions either by email, or you can even reach out to me on Twitter as well. Okay, so first we're going to get into copyright and why does it matter? So what is copyright? So I like to start with the Oxford English Dictionary definition, just because it's, as is often the case, it's quite succinct. And so it is it is the exclusive right given by law for a certain term of years to an author, composer, designer, etc., or their assignee to print, publish, and sell copies of their original work. Now, in Canada, the current term of years is 50 years. So it's the life of the author and then 50 years after their death before it enters the public domain. And they're currently negotiating to extend that to 70 years as part of the new free trade agreement, unfortunately, but currently it's still 50 years. And then the second definition is that copyright means that something is protected by copyright, or is not allowed by law to be printed or copied except by permission of the author. Now, there are exceptions, and that is, of course, something that is very important for educators. And we're going to talk about the various exceptions to copyright today. And so these are very important for you to, at the very least, have a bit of a passing knowledge of, because they will play a significant role in how you can work with your materials in the course of your pedagogy. So when it comes to dealing with copyrighted works, there really are two primary considerations that you need to keep in mind. So the first one is the legal one. So, in other words, am I allowed to use this work? Does copyright law allow me to do this? And then the second one is the moral consideration, which is it wrong to misuse the work in a particular way, and what are the moral rights that are assigned to a copyrighted work. And really at its core, there may be sort of fringe considerations, but most copyright questions really do boil down to these considerations, and it's helpful to really keep these in mind when thinking about how it is that you want to be using material. So, and actually, I kind of give you an aside as a example of the moral rights. You can sign away your legal copyright to a work, so you can sign away the economic rights to it, but you still retain the moral rights. So there's an important Canadian copyright case where a sculptor had sold his sculptures, it's Michael Snow, he's a famous Canadian artist, who sold his sculptures of Canada geese in mid-flight to Cadillac Fairview, which used to run the Eaton Centre in Toronto. And at Christmas time, the Eaton Centre would put red bows on the geese, and Michael Snow objected to this, saying that it was an infringement of his moral right, even though that they had bought the artworks. And he argued that his moral rights meant that they weren't able to alter it, and he won. He won the case, and so that is really a landmark in Canadian copyright law in terms of what you do with the material is, even if there's attribution, even if it's something that you're freely able to use, you still have to sometimes consider, is it in the spirit of the work, or is it somehow misrepresenting it, because that could be an infringement of moral copyright. So to get back on track, not all works are created equal. While the creator retains the rights at the point of creation, so you don't need to register copyright, it is possible, you can absolutely register copyright if you want to, but it is not necessary. And it is possible to attribute, to put different terms of use attached to a work right at the outset of creation. And this can include things like open licenses and making things free to use. Often Creative Commons licenses, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more, and I'm actually going to show you a breakdown of what Creative Commons licenses look like and how to read them. But if they do have a Creative Commons license on it, then there's really minimal risk in using it. And often all they will ask for is that there's attribution. And CC BY is the most permissive license, and BY it's not an acronym. It's a Creative Commons. CC is an acronym, but then BY is just that you just need to provide attribution. That is all that you need. Okay, so I've mentioned that there are exceptions for educators, and that covers the span from everybody from a kindergarten teacher all the way up to a university professor. So I'm going to go over these a little bit. So the Canadian Copyright Act outlines what copyright is and the rules that govern its interpretation and its use in Canada. And it covers a wide range of uses and definitions and whatnot. But in terms of the educational exceptions, the really important thing that people focus on are the section of the Copyright Act that talk about exceptions in their entirety. And so an exception is exactly what it sounds like. What are the ways in which you can take a copyrighted work and use it without having to obtain permission or pay for it? And there are a number of exceptions. So some of these can include, for instance, making a copy accessible for users that might have a print disability, and things for news reporting, a satire, that sort of thing. And then, of course, another one is education. Now, education was assumed to be part of the Act, but then it was expanded upon in 2012. So the exceptions are The first one is under fair dealing. Now, fair dealing is a very important term, a very important concept. The Americans call it fair use, and here we have fair dealing. And so it outlines a list of things that you can use for take copyrighted works and use them. So research, private study, education, parody, or satire. Education is something that was added in 2012. And then also they include the section 29.4 for educational institutions. It's not an infringement of copyright for an educational institution or person acting under its authority to reproduce a work. Now, this is important because, of course, in some cases, there are people in educational institutions that will be taking a work and manipulating it and putting course readers together, or in the case of an accessibility office or something like that, taking a work and converting it into a usable format. So these are all things that are important. And right now, with COVID, and again, I will elaborate on this later, is that there's more leeway in terms of not necessarily being able to access the library, for instance, and access library materials. So this means that we need to be somewhat permissive, and it's certainly a mitigating circumstance that makes the use of materials more and more tricky. So that's what the Copyright Act says. But then, of course, in Canada, we have we're a common law system. So that means that the courts also help build our legal system through case law. And so, landmark copyright case. There are actually, they call it the copyright pentalogy. There were 5 landmark copyright cases that all dropped at the same time in July of 2012. And one of these was Alberta and access copyright. And so the case, it's very complicated, but in a nutshell, the case flowed out of the Canadian Copyright Board, which is an organization that is run by the federal government that helps to set copyright tariffs in Canada, among other things, but will adjudicate on copyright disputes and whatnot. But the important thing to know is that they will set the tariff levels for the reproduction of uses. So the Access Copyright, which is a collective of copyright holders, went to the various school boards and said, this is the tariff that we want to set. And it's the cost that is charged per item that is copied. And so the long and short of it is that they had a very, very restrictive tariff, and the various boards of education, and Alberta was one of the boards, but it was all of the provincial education ministries of education that appealed to the Supreme Court for a judicial review. And so this came at the same time as the Copyright Modernization Act, which updated the act and included education as a fair dealing purpose. But the Supreme Court decision really strongly outlined the fact that educators have a right to reproduce works for the study of their students, so that it didn't work in splendid isolation, because the Access Copyright was arguing that what a student does in reading material is somehow different than what the educator does in providing it, that they're separate things. And the Supreme Court said, no, that's silly, which realistically, I think it is pretty silly that they would argue otherwise, and said that educators in reproducing works are facilitating independent learning. So they direct students to read a certain thing, they're reproducing it so that the students can take that work back and learn from it. So that was what the Supreme Court said. So it really helped to clarify the ways in which material could be used, and the fact, and it gave teeth to the idea that educators are able to use these exceptions to help provide materials to their students. So what are these types of materials? And it really can be anything, but in my experience, the primary types of material that people use for instruction are textual print materials, so articles, like photocopies from a book or whatever, newspaper, magazine, images and diagrams, so something to illustrate a point, or have, my cat is scratching at the door, sorry. What is that sound? It's my cat. I've locked her out. The images and diagrams, so an image from a textbook or something like that that is used to illustrate a specific point. And then, of course, a very, very common request that we're getting, and especially now with COVID and people using Zoom, using video as a means of instruction. And a question that I'm getting a lot of is with regard to multimedia resources. So things specifically video, but also I've had a lot of questions about music as well. So ways in which these materials can be used is you can assign a textbook, obviously, but then there's also things like copyright exceptions. There's library materials if you're somewhere that has, if you're in the university setting or a college setting, of course, we do have the library and we have our various license materials. There's also things like transactional licenses, which are transactional licenses when you go to a rights holder and say, I want to use this work for this purpose. And usually they'll say, okay, well, how many students and how much of the book or the article or whatever are you planning on using, and how long is the course that you're using, and here's the price. And transactional licensing is actually really great because you're paying for what you need, and it's if there's a way to absorb that cost, then it's great because then you can be sure that what you're doing it legally. And they're usually, in my experience, transactional licensing fees are usually pretty modest. Like I've been surprised that I've had quotes like usually it's like 50, 60, 70 bucks or something like that for a large course. They're usually very, very fair. It's pennies per page. And then, of course, there's using open material. So it can be more current material that has an open license or is open access or has Creative Commons license. Also OERs, open educational resources, which I will talk a little bit more about later. And then finally, of course, there's public domain materials. So these are the materials for which the copyright has lapsed. And it says the life of the author and 50 years after their death. So typically you're not getting new stuff. And so it is possible to have stuff and to have new stuff, give a public domain license. But generally speaking, that's very uncommon. Okay, so then how do you use this stuff? Like when you're looking at all the different types of material, you need to decide what is the material and how much of it are you using. So we're going to go over a few. So one of the most important things, I cannot stress this enough, is attribution. Attribution is so important. So often issues where I have had to get involved where there's been irate rights holders that are upset about the ways in which something has been used. Usually it's because the person that has been infringing just didn't provide attribution, and that's really, it's more often than not they're upset less about the loss of the financial gain than they are about the not receiving credit for their work. And listen, I can't stress it enough. And as I mentioned earlier, the Creative Commons CC BY, it is the BY that you need to be concerned about. So even if you're free to use it, and CC BY license, you're free to use it. If you don't provide the attribution, that's problematic, and that's an infringement of copyright on something that is free to use. So you have to be careful. So a very, 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 to kind of highlight this point, in addition to attribution, linking is also something that you really need to do if you're using YouTube videos or whatever. So the example that I like to give is, so a few years ago, the CBC was sued for using a YouTube video without permission. And so they didn't provide attribution, they didn't link. And what they did is they downloaded the video and put their own CBC overlay on it, and they posted it on their website. CNN did the same thing. It was in Buffalo. It was a winter storm. There was somebody who was in their office, and there was a lake effect storm where the suburbs of Buffalo got like 8 feet of snow, and downtown got a couple of inches, and there was this wall of snow that came off Lake Erie. It was very impressive. It was a cool video, and storm was big in the news, and then this video was popular because it really highlighted that point. And most people just linked to it, put in the YouTube video and embedded it, whatever. But CBC and CNN did not. So the person that uploaded it was very upset, and they sued them. And the thing that's really amazing is the person that uploaded it was a intellectual property lawyer in Buffalo. And in downtown Buffalo, we had a high-rise office, and he had a video in his office, a camera in his office, and he videotaped the storm. So he, of course, sued them. And he would know. And the wild thing is that he said, he was quoted in the story saying that he didn't have a problem with people embedding or linking to it, because then he would be able to take advantage of the video with his monetization. And it's about credit. So provide links, provide attribution. Don't just go and take stuff and upload it. It doesn't have to be really, you can have a table of contents at the end of sort of like a list of authorities or bibliography, or you can put, my best practices with my slides is I try to put a link with the title and the link. Be consistent. It doesn't have to be much. It really, really, really doesn't. And I often teach on citation and academic integrity, and the bar is low to clear it. As long as you're making a good faith attempt to provide attribution and provide credit, it really goes a long way to mollifying anybody that might be upset. So there are other things that can mitigate issues. So non-commercial use, of course. If, for instance, you have a password protected firewall, or you can also ask permission. And a lot of people are quite forgiving, especially if you are teaching at the K-12 level. Rights holders are going to be more open to the idea of just saying, no, it's fine. I don't mind. And password protected firewall is interesting. I'll be honest that I'm not certain. I'm assuming that more K-12 classes are doing stuff like that now, but certainly it was something that I would have assumed would be more of a post-secondary use of instructional material pre-COVID, but I'm assuming that that's something that is probably being used more now. I don't know that for a fact, but that would be my feeling. Like certainly with my kids when they were off for a couple of weeks, we had a Google page that we had to, and there was password protected. So, but I'm assuming that's the case in many other instances. So it really is situational, depending on what your circumstances are and the sorts of material that you're using. So I've talked a bit about fair dealing, but I want to kind of get into a little bit as to what exactly fair dealing is. And so it can be complicated. I try to make it less complicated. And so that's why most places, most institutions that have copyright policies try to boil it down to relatively straightforward terms, because if you don't, then you can really kind of get into the weeds on it and psych yourself out. So we try to avoid doing that. But basically what the provision is it says that in certain circumstances with certain materials, you have an exception from copyright, and education, as I've said, is one of them. However, it is not a blank check for wholesale use. So you can't just go and take an entire book and just say, well, I'm using it for education and just upload it, because that's not fair. And so fairness is tricky. The test for fairness is outlined in the CCH and Law Society of Upper Canada case that is from 2004. I'm not going to get into that too much here. If anybody wants to go and look it up, you can. I have included quite a detailed breakdown that we have on our Copyright at Western website, and so you can go in and you can take a look at it, and it will give you a sense of how stuff breaks down, and to give you a better idea of some of the details in terms of what the 6 factors are. But sorry, let's go back. Basically, the rule of thumb is that fair dealing is 10% or a chapter or a single image or an article, whichever is greater. So for instance, if a chapter or an article that you are using is 15-20% of the originating work, you can use it. You can use that 15 to 20%. You just can't use more than that. You can't use more than one chapter. And the other thing that you really need to be concerned about is aggregate copying as well. So for instance, taking a chapter one week, and then the next week taking another chapter, and so on, so that you're using it up. And that's something that we've had to be very careful with in the Copyright Office with our course preserve service, is because we are shifting heavily on to digital materials, is to try to avoid aggregate sharing, even accidental aggregate copying. And so it's tricky, but roughly 10% or a chapter or a single image, whatever. And it's all relational in the ways in which it works in the context of the original work. So it's tricky. That's why we try to boil it down. 10% chapter. Don't psych yourself out about it too much more than that. It is possible to definitely have more nuance than that, but from a sort of thumbnail sketch in terms of what you need to know, that is the rule of thumb that we provide. Okay, so I'm going to talk very briefly about open access and OER. So open access is, you will frequently see stuff referred to as OA, and that stands for open access, and then OER stands for open educational resources. Now, OERs in particular, there's a huge investment push behind them right now, and they've been a growing movement. Specifically in Canada, they've been a big deal out in British Columbia. BC Campus was their organization that started out there, and heavily investing in materials that are textbooks or books or resources, whatever it is. Typically people are, but most of them are books, but there could be modules, like learning modules or whatever, that can be modified. That's the whole point, is that they're open, so people can take what they need from it, and it can be more than 10% because it's intended to be open, and adapt and adjust it to their needs, and it's free. Quality control is obviously something that has been seen as an issue, but there's been a great deal of effort being put into that by having sort of central bodies that control this. And one of the things, I'm sorry, I've got my slides, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I will go back for, in Ontario, we now have eCampus, eCampus Ontario, and they actually have an open library. Now, eCampus does a number of things, but their open library is available. It's on their website, and so I've got a screenshot here. And eCampus has been investing heavily in the creation of open educational resources in Ontario, and they're right now it's ongoing. I'm one of the reviewers for it, actually. They're $50 million that they're investing in the creation of OER material in Ontario. And so they put out a call for educators to create materials, and then they applied to get grant money from eCampus to create materials, and so they're looking to aggressively grow it. There's hundreds of materials in the open library. The great thing is that they can be adjusted. So like if they are more or less advanced in what you might need, you can take it and adjust it and go in, tweak it, and do whatever you want with it, as long as you attribute, of course. And so it's a great resource for making stuff free and accessible. So the other thing, so I've talked about the Creative Commons licenses. So Creative Commons is an organization that is like an advocacy body. They do also have a library as well. But one of their big things is about promoting open, promoting the movement, raising awareness, and so on. And one of the ways they've been doing this is through their Creative Commons licensing system. And it's great because you can go on their website. If you're not sure what you want to do, they actually have a license generator. And it will ask you questions about what you would want to do with the material. And it will generate a license, and you can attach it to whatever, your video or a book or anything at all. And so this chart shows what the different licenses are, and how they can be used. So it's very, very helpful for that. Okay, so I want to go over into sort of the practical stuff. We're running out of time for the presentation portion, so I'll open the floor soon. But getting into some of the practical solutions that you need for determining what and how resources should be used. So I know that by now you've probably kind of got the sense that there's a lot of equivocating that goes on, unfortunately, when dealing with it. Copyrighted material. It really is very contextual, and so it does require a bit of work to analyze it. When you do it, as long as I've been doing it, you can kind of like look at it at a glance and kind of get a sense. And it's certainly possible to learn that and just kind of get an instinctive understanding. And so one of the ways that you do that is that you evaluate the work on 4 factors. So the first one is what exactly it is that you're copying, and then what is the relationship to the work from which it came. So is it a majorly significant part? Like it might be 5% of the work, but it could be absolutely critical. and then what are the characteristics of the parent work, and what you are going to be doing with the copies that you make. So if you're using it for, you're not charging for it, and it's for educational purposes, that's usually a pretty good mitigating factor. So but you have to take all of these factors and kind of look at it and think, okay, well, does this feel right? And so much of that is just kind of like a gut feeling. Does this feel right? Does, like, if you have to ask yourself, if you think, well, maybe this doesn't feel right, then maybe it's not. Then you can always ask. You can always ask me, and I'm happy to help to answer those questions. And we at the Western Copyright Office have actually drafted a copyright decision map, which is great. You can print it up. Normally, in pre-COVID, we actually had these on handouts. So if I was doing the session, I'd hand out the map to people, and you could have that as a sort of a handy physical reference. But it's also available digitally on our website. And the other thing is to say, if you're looking for sources for images, if you're converting material, if you've got a course, some course material that you're not sure about what it is that you're trying to attribute, you're like, I know I have this, I love this image, I want to provide attribution. Google actually has a reverse image search. And if you go on Google Image, you click on the camera, and you upload the image, and it will try to track it down for you, and we'll pull up the different websites that have it. It's not a fail-safe. I was working on an OER where the authors provided me with 600 images without attribution, so I had to do reverse image searching for most of them. And I would say it was probably 60-40 that I was able to actually find where they came from. But it's a good start. And sometimes if you're not sure, but you're like, you know what, this is, I feel like I've made a really good effort, and this feels like it might be like it's coming from the Toronto Star or the New York Times or whatever, you could just link to that. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing at all. And then, of course, there's lots of image banks for free images and diagrams. Again, Google has in their advanced image search, you can go to they have the usage rates at the very bottom, then you can say free to use or share, and it will search anything that comes up there, almost anything anyway, is usually free to use or share with attribution. The Noun Project has tons of free icons. You can subscribe to it and get them without the watermarks on them, but even so, they're not watermarks, they're little Noun Project labels on them. Then there's Wikimedia Commons, and the New York Public Library digital collections are phenomenal. I love going in there. It's like a virtual museum or art gallery. It's just amazing stuff that they have there. Most are free to use. They have tried to track down the permissions. On most of the images they will tell you whether or not they seek to do it. So it's a pretty good chance that anything that you would be getting from there would be free to use. And then, of course, Creative Commons also has a database as well. So, as I mentioned, videos are very popular. And contrary to what people believe, YouTube's actually a pretty good place to go. There's a lot of crap on YouTube. There's a lot of illegally uploaded stuff. But there's also a lot of stuff where it's perfectly legal that it's been uploaded, and you're absolutely within your rights to share and to link and to embed. As I mentioned earlier, do not download it and then don't provide attribution or linking. But they're fantastic. It really is actually a pretty great resource. And so often, again, the smell test, you can usually tell by looking at it. If it's legally uploaded, it's usually pretty obvious. But again, if you're not sure, you can ask. You can even ask the holder. For instance, I had somebody contact me about a video that they thought was not legally uploaded. But as it turns out, it was uploaded by a professor, and it was uploaded on his personal name. And it was a project that his class was doing. And part of the project was the creation of videos that were to be uploaded on YouTube. So the bit of digging, it was absolutely fine to use. And they were able to use it for their course. And the other thing is libraries often have a lot of licensed content, and certainly at Western we do, but London Public Library also has a lot. If anybody doesn't have a London Public Library card, then you should get one, because they have Canopy, which is a phenomenal video platform. There's all sorts of really great stuff on there. And it actually, Canopy is often, you can put on your TV or whatever. My TV has a Canopy app, and so I'm actually able to use my London Public Library license to get Canopy content and stream it on my TV. Phenomenal. And in terms of online instruction, it is permissible to broadcast legally obtained video content to the class. It has to be at the same time. It's only synchronous. You can't upload videos, because that's technically it's copying and sharing. If somebody's recording it, well, then they shouldn't be doing that. But for synchronous instruction, it's possible to do legally obtained stuff. And that legally obtained is a low bar. Yes, you can own it, but it's also something that perhaps is a hard copy that you borrowed from the library or something like that. That's still legally obtained. And also, Netflix is an excellent source for videos. They actually have an educational license, and I've got a screen cap from their website, and they have a list. So if it's specifically for their Netflix-produced documentaries, phenomenal resource and free to use, and you can use your own personal Netflix account. You don't, your students would need to have that. Again, here's a Now Project icon. Trust your instincts. Your instincts will honestly get you most of the way, most of the time. So you've, based even on some of the discussions that we've had today, you should have some sense of what is or is not acceptable. Use your instincts, hone your instincts, and use them. And again, you can ask. That's why we have a copyright office at Western. Even if you're no longer working at Western, I would be happy to, if you're no longer a student at Western, I would be happy to answer questions. If you email me, I'd be happy to answer questions that you might have about content material that you would be looking to use. Again, attribution. Cannot emphasize that enough. Okay, and COVID and copyright. Just touching on this, it really has changed everything and nothing at all at the same time, because in moving stuff online, we really needed to consider COVID as a mitigating factor. And my personal opinion is that it should give people more confidence in being able to use material, because frankly, in many cases, there's no other alternative. So it's either people learn, people get the material, or they don't. And frankly, to me, that is enough of a reason to take a chance. If you're on the fence on something, do it, and don't worry about it too much. Okay, so here's again my contact information, and I'm opening the floor up for questions now. Okay. All right. So the first question I have is, if we want to share a video as part of asynchronous teaching, would you just recommend that we provide a reference and link for a student to view on their own time? So for asynchronous teaching, if you want to have a video for asynchronous teaching, you will need to get permission for the video to do whatever with it. If it's a matter of ripping it and uploading it, or somehow so it would have to be from the rights holder or the publisher or whatever. In some cases, they will charge for it. In some cases, they won't. I had a case earlier this week where somebody contacted me about a video that I thought, oh God, they've uploaded it and don't have permission, and it's messy. They were able to get permission, and it was somebody was just like, yeah, it's fine. You can just use it, and didn't ask for them to pay for it or anything like that. So, but I know it's more convenient. And so often we do try, we have had cases of having a scramble to get a license, and it's doable usually. Or in some cases, you might get lucky-ish in that the rights holder may have gone out of business or something like that. And that does happen, especially for older material where you might not be able to find the rights holder, in which case it's not ideal, but you would be able to feel more confident in uploading the material. Okay, and Leah has uploaded some other fantastic resources for images. So thank you so much for that, Leah. I appreciate that. And then we have another question. So another question I had was in regard to reproducing diagrams from a textbook to make student worksheets. Is that generally fine as long as you cite the textbook as the source? Depends. Diagrams are such a dicey thing because if you're reproducing the chapter as part of the sort of larger work, and it sort of de-emphasizes the diagram. But if you're focusing specifically on the diagram, then that, strictly speaking, you're really only supposed to use one per textbook. So again, it's a trust your instincts thing. I would, in a perfect world, you would be able to find alternatives and whatnot. In many cases, though, I know that textbooks are very discipline specific. So, but it would be ideal to get permission if you're looking to be using a large amount. But if it's a small handful and there's other sort of contextual information around it and it adds up to less than 10%, if you can find a reason to have that contextual information, that might be helpful. Okay. So how does copyright law, sorry, this is Halise, sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. How does copyright law impact the way that we as teachers plan and develop lessons and units? Well, I mean, I guess it depends on the amount of sort of secondary material that you're relying on. Like if you're putting together reading material that is outside of a textbook that, say, the school provides, then you need to consider it, because I mean, as an educator, you're still under the obligation to ensure that the material that you're using is compliant with copyright law, which was the sort of the crux of the dispute that was between Access Copyright and the various provincial ministries of education, because the publishers were basically trying to squeeze the school boards to pony up more money for the reproduction of material, because previously their post-secondary as well as school boards would pay for a blanket license. But as we've moved into an expanded fair dealing model, they have felt more comfortable in reproducing the material and relying on the exception, but it does require more sort of more assiduous attribution and documenting of what you're using and how you're using it, without having to pay the tariff or pay a lower tariff. So that's been very, very contentious, but ultimately it does provide more flexibility with the material. But you just need to be more careful in how you're using it. So, and Paula, do we need to be concerned when students share materials like in a group presentation? Technically, yes. That's what students do with material is always, and how it impacts the instructor is always a bit of a tricky distinction. So I'm sure you're all familiar with, like, say, Course Hero and whatnot. And Course Hero is students taking material and using it, sometimes in a way that's okay and sometimes not. And the instructor there's limited liability in terms of how much control the instructor has over it. That being said, I think it would be it's helpful from a liability perspective to tell students that there is copyright law, and you do need to be careful about how you use materials. But I wouldn't be policing it too much. It's unreasonable. It's unreasonable to expect that instructors and educators police that too much, because you'll be creating work for yourself, and it's really is whack-a-mole. I mean, people, there's so many means for infringement nowadays that we're just kind of trying to head above water and trying to do what we can as best we can legally. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about it too much beyond just telling people that they do have an obligation, and then leave it at that. Okay, so do I have to put the link on the slide, or can I link directly onto an image or still image of the video? And then can I just specify at the end of the presentation that you need to control click to go to the website? The link on the slide, yeah, I know it's not the most attractive thing. You would ideally, it would be, in a perfect world, you would have it on the slide itself, but you do need to have it written out. You could have it at the end, though. If you don't want to have it on the slide itself, you could have a slide at the very end that you don't actually use, or if you're sharing it, be like, it's there, just so long as that there's a list of things that have been used in the presentation. That would be fine. That's a decent compromise. And then, so about the YouTube video issue, if the asynchronous lesson directs students to the original video by link, not uploading the video directly, would we still need permission? No. Where you could run into issues is if it is linking to a video that is illegally uploaded. So like a sketchy YouTube video or something like that. That could be where you have a problem. But the thing is, if it's legally uploaded on YouTube, then you could share it in a course. So it's more concerned about is creating new content that is otherwise locked down. So, for instance, on a DVD that is not freely available online, or you would need to purchase it. That's where the issue is. So if you're linking to something that's freely available, then it's probably illegally uploaded unless it's free to use, in which case you could link to it in an asynchronous. Sorry if that sounds sort of convoluted, but yeah, if it's linking to something that is illegally uploaded, then you shouldn't be doing it. Okay. And is attribution as simple as providing references on our slides, handouts, worksheets? I'm still a little bit confused. Yeah, you know what? It's a low bar. That's why I like attribution is really just giving credit, and don't get bogged down in ensuring that it is to a specific citation style or whatever. Really, as long as there's enough information that somebody who wants to know where the video or the resource or the image or the chapter or whatever is from, that they can find it reasonably. So as long as you're reasonably consistent and that you provide just enough information, then that's fine. Don't get too concerned about the ins and outs of like ensuring that the citation is absolutely correct. Sometimes I have people coming to me concerned because it's where's the period in the attribution? Is it in the right place? It's like, that's not what we're concerned about. What you're concerned about is credit, to be able for somebody to be able to reasonably look at it and know where it's coming from. And so yes, it's a low bar. So don't overthink it too much. And things like tweets or other social media posts from public figures fine to share a lesson for the sake of analysis. Yes, tweets are made publicly available, and you're absolutely, I actually researched on this a while ago because I wasn't sure. And yes, tweets are absolutely fine to share, and screenshot, link to, whatever, by all means. Okay, does anybody have any other questions? Okay, well then I think we're done. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for, like I said at the beginning, taking time out of your schedule to give this awesome presentation for us. Everybody have a great rest of your conference week. And yeah, have a good night, everybody.